So welcome once again to our viewers, wherever you are. You're very welcome along to our story. This video concerns Christopher Lucey, whose 100th anniversary occurs on the 10th of November. His name is Christopher Patrick Lucey. He died on the 10th of November 1920 in Toreendubh, Ballingeary. He was late of number 3 Pembroke Street in Cork. He was born on the 21st of December 1897 to John Lucey, formerly of Co.Cork in Shigila, and Nora Lucey of Kentuck. He is remembered by the descendants of the Lucey and the Kennedy families, Eresh Day Gurevananam Deelish. This announcement appeared in our parish newsletter for the November prayers of the deceased, and this video was really encouraged by Joan McSweeney Lucey, that she was very keen that even though with the COVID situation, that we would remember Christopher Patrick Lucey. I'm joined today with a man from very near Toreendubh. You were born in Toreendubh, or reared in Toreendubh, and we recently visited the memorial site at Toreendubh, and it's one of two memorials. The memorial stands on the roadside at Toreendubh, but Christopher actually died in Cork, which was maybe 100 yards away, roughly. Well, was it more? Maybe 200 or 300?
It's 300 yards.
300 yards away.
It was,
yeah. And the weather was really bad the day we went to visit, so we've had to come indoors to record the story. And one of the lovely parts of the story was that your father was with a group of people 50 years ago that put up these memorials, and your father was involved in the building of the memorial that appears with the piper in this video.
That's right, yeah. And my brother and myself, my brother Fionney, we put a base down on Saturday for a new bit of extension to it, and just to make it to perk it up small.
Prepare it for the 100th anniversary.
50 years on again, his sons were working on it, so it's a nice touch,
And it's a testament to the community that got together those 50 years ago and put up not one but two monuments.
Yeah, actually they intended, to put up one monument where Christopher was shot, but they had money left over. They collected so much money at the Church Day collection that they decided to put a monument as well to where the shot was fired.
Yes.
So that's why there's two nowadays.
And it's on the roadside, which is important because anybody travelling from Ballingeary to Bantry will pass this memorial.
That's right,
and so it brings the story to people's mind today on his centenary.
That's right, yeah. He was shot there in the morning of the 10th. The words in the military archive in Dublin Castle was that he was arrested, that he was armed, and that he fired a shot at the auxiliaries, Black and Tans, and he evaded them, and they shot him afterwards. That was the word in Dublin Castle. But he wasn't armed at all, and he wasn't actually arrested. They just shot him from the roadside across. So at the time, Christopher Lucey was from Cork, and he came to Ballingeary. He was 22 when he died. I think he came to Ballingeary when he was 19, and he was in the summer college, Clash in the Moon, learning Irish. He had a great graph for the girl, I'd say, and he was interested in...
He was then a medical student as well, wasn't he?
That's right, he went to Christian Brothers in somewhere in Cork City, and he ended up in UCC doing medicine, correct, yeah. And I suppose he got to know them very well up there. He had relations in Ballingeary also. There were Lucys, I think Kate and Julia Lucey in Drummonallig, were his aunts, I suppose his father's sisters.
Yeah. And
the Toomeys in Toreendubh, which was a great Republican household and a great centre of a lot of things going on at the time.
You were saying that Terence McSweeney was a regular visitor to the...
That's right, yeah.
To Toomeys.
Toomeys in Toreendubh, yeah.
And that he had spent his honeymoon there.
That's right, with Muriel.
Correct,
yeah.
Right.
And he was also there as well when he was supposed to be in Cork doing the Rising in 1916, which was postponed, but they actually went ahead with it in Dublin, so he was supposed to have been in Cork, getting the things organised there and acting out, but it was actually in Toreendubh he was at the time.
Yeah, and really Ballingeary, from the establishment of Coláiste on the Moon was really leading in the Celtic revival, because the language was so crucial to changing the mindset of the people, preparing them for 1916, and that really was the path towards the War of Independence, which again was fought as a guerrilla war, so that even Tom Barry was a regular visitor in the hills overhead, and De Valera, and even in the Coláiste on the Moon, Douglas Nahida was a Toreendubh holiday maker. And I think Roger Casement was very involved in the establishment of Coláiste on the Moon as well. He fundraised for it.
I think he was, yes. It was a huge amount, because they were coming there, they were mixing with the local people, and I think that's why in 1916, when there was a lot of activity as well, the lads that cycled back to Craighill, there was 16 Ballingeary people at the time doing that, which were a lot of communities didn't have that many people that were involved, were volunteers. And I suppose it was meeting those people coming out to the college and with the locals, and they kind of got that sort of interest going among the locals. So that's why there was such an interest, I suppose, in Ballingeary. Went to Toreendubh in particular, because people stayed in Toreendubh. I think there was a dance hall across the road as well, and the people living there were very sociable and great fun apparently, so that's why they kept coming back also.
It was a little bit away from the village. It's sort of about 3 miles from Ballingeary.
Yeah, about 2 miles from the village, that's right, yeah. So on the morning, Christopher Lucey then, he was involved in the lorry ambush. There were 2 lorries taking supplies to, I think it was to the Eccles, or to Ballingeary. That's right, yeah. And one of them went into difficulty on the dike of the road, and they had to stop, so then the news went out around the community, and the volunteers got together and they actually ambushed it, and they took the supplies off, and they took the munitions and guns from the auxiliaries that were on board, Black and Tans, and they took away the stuff. A lot of it was paint, apparently, so that's why they called it the paint lorry incident. But Christopher Lucey was involved in that, along with 2 of the Toomey brothers, people in the house, Liam and Tyke. So after that then, Christopher Lucey was in Coláiste on the Moon, and the Black and Tans walked in to make arrests, and they arrested 3 people there for the lorry incident, I think, and that Christopher Lucey was one of them. So he was taken to Cork then for prison for a while. I think he was released for some reason, but after that then they were on their own run really. The Black and Tans used to come to Ballingeary Mass, after Mass, and there was Quran.
You were saying that the barrack in Ballingeary had been under pressure, that there were people who were attacking the barrack, and that the RIC withdrew from the barrack at Ballingeary.
They did, yes, yeah. They knew that the locals.
That was prior to this incident.
It was prior to earlier in the year, yes.
Yeah.
And they wanted they got no cooperation from the Ballingeary people. They weren't helping anyway, and there was a big chance of an attack on the barracks. And so what they did then was they brought extra auxiliaries, Black Tans, into the barrack, for the RIC people into the barrack for their own defence, and the building was too small for them, and they kind of got, I think it was kind of not that comfortable there either, whatever, and there was a big raid planned for a Sunday, but it didn't work out for some reason, and then the following Sunday the Black and Tans, or the RIC, left the barrack. So when they left the barrack, then the locals burned down the barrack so they wouldn't return. That was in June, I think, in
1920.
That's correct, yeah. And after that then, the lorries, to take control of Ballingeary, they sent lorries out from Macroom with auxiliaries, and when the lorries just come out, then there were certain vantage points along the road in Ballingeary where the alert would be raised that they're around. So that actually happened on the morning of the
November the 10th
killing as well, yeah. But Christopher Lucey then, because he was being arrested, and there was a shoot to kill policy announced in the village after Mass, and they became very afraid then, because they were going to be shot on sight, and the auxiliaries knew who they were looking for, that they were involved in the lorry incident. So Christopher was staying in a place we call Ballingeary or Closhy Lucey in Toreendubh, in Lucey's cave, and he was there for a good few months and living rough. You know, it wasn't easy going on, I might say. And there was one story about that his books had got wet up there.
His medical books.
His medical books, I presume, and his Irish books, and they were being dried out in Toomey's household. And there was one day that a raid was being carried around the house by the Black and Tans, and quickly the mother of the house, who was an elderly lady at the time, collected the books and took them up into bed herself, and she surrounded herself with the books underneath the blankets. So when they came into the room, they just didn't. They
didn't disturb her any further.
But if they'd found the books, they'd been a murder. Yeah. So on the morning of the 10th, anyhow, Christopher Lucey apparently came down from the cave he had his meals in Toreendubh. But on his way down, he saw the lorries coming up from, I suppose, Tigbarra down further, and he ran the extra bit of the way to alert the house. But when he got to the house, it turns out that they already knew that the auxiliaries were on the way up. So Tig and Liam had evaded the house already into a plan. They went across the road again, up towards the cave.
Southbound?
Actually northbound.
Or northbound,
across the main road,
yeah.
up into there's a kind of a steep cliffy part there to the right. And when Chris Dorr didn't realise that, instead of going up there, he kind of got afraid because he thought, I presumed, that the lorries were up too far. He went down the other direction. He went south. So he headed down for the River Lee and across the River Lee and go up across Co.Cork. Then the auxiliaries had seen movement, I suppose. There were very little trees at the time. And I think he stopped to look back, see where they were coming from, or maybe take a break or whatever behind a holly bush. And at that point, one of the bullets came apparently in one cheek or one side of the head or whatever,
yeah.
and out the cheek and the other side.
Fatal wound.
Fatal wound, yeah. Had to stop him there then. So
that was his death.
That was his
but
death,
you
yeah.
said there was a story about the curate that they sent for the curate to give the last rites.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but before that, the Annie Deneen. We mentioned Annie Deneen.
We did.
Yeah,
she was a centenarian.
Centurion.
Yeah, that's right.
Centurion. Yeah, she was 100 years old last year, and she was actually would have been born 1 year before that shot was fired.
Imagine.
And she lived next door to where he was shot in Co.Cork. Yeah. And I think a door was taken off the shed of their house, or one of the outside sheds, and he was put on the door and taken across the river, then back up to Toreendubh. So it's amazing that she was actually in the house at the time.
Imagine, and we knew her quite well, and she was a sprightly lady.
It's amazing shame she didn't make the full journey to it.
Yeah.
But where I was going to after that, well, the priest was called, that's correct, yeah. And when the priest was on his way up from the village on a bike, the auxiliaries were on the way back down, so they stayed around for a while. And they slowed down, and the passenger, occupant of the passenger seat, shouted to him that there's work for you back there. So that was the priest knew there was a fatality. But the person that fired the shot then, it was just 7 feet to the right of where the monument is. It was an amazing shot, and there was great jubilation by them afterwards.
Yes.
Because it was such a good shot, I suppose.
Yes,
and
that they had gotten their prize, as they felt.
Correct, yeah. But he was, they were celebrating that night in the Market Bar. I think it was in Macroom, I'm not sure where it is now, but the old days was called Market Bar. And the person behind the counter there, I suppose, was a volunteer himself, and he memorised the name and the
details
people around.
Yeah.
I think sometime after that, then that soldier signed his name to rent out a vehicle, I think, for the army, or in somewhere in Cork City. And when he returned that evening, they actually shot him. So he didn't make it past 1920 either.
Yeah. It was a very turbulent time. Kevin Barry had only died a few weeks prior to this, and recently we were reading about the death of Terence McSweeney, and I suppose the whole world had followed that story, and I suppose in Ireland the propaganda worked, and that the freedom fighters were seen in a very positive light. It was spurring on their work with them.
It was dangerous work as well.
Dangerous work.
And I presume they had been inside of Toreendubh McSweeney's funeral already. And then for Chris Dorr, his funeral was in Cork City also. And all the Ballingeary volunteers, I suppose, went into that as well. Yeah. And apparently there was only 100 people supposed to be allowed at the funeral by the
authorities.
Yeah. But I think a lot more than that attended. It was a huge occasion in the city, and apparently the armoured car by the RICs went behind the hearse in front of the mourners, which was not a nice thing to do, really, I suppose. He's buried in the Republican plot.
And of course, they said one of the first incidences of the War of Independence happened in Ballingeary too, involving the local RIC. At
Ballingeary, Mount of the Glen.
Yeah, was that in early 1920? Or was it in 1919?
I think it was 1919.
Yeah.
The commemoration for it.
Do you remember, you remember a few of the survivors? There was one great character, Fatherine, let's call him, that he was, lost a leg or something.
That's right, Ty Callahan, yeah.
Ty Callahan, that's right.
He was, yeah.
And he would have been one of the volunteers.
That's correct, yeah. He went on hunger strike. I think he was on hunger strike at the same time that Christopher Losa. Christopher Losa had actually been involved in an incident down in Skibbereen before that. And I think from when he was part of the battalion company in Cork, the volunteers. And he would Cork prisoned in for a while and then moved to Mountjoy, and all the Republican prisoners in Mountjoy at the time went on hunger strike. Apparently it was a tactic they had to get released, because they didn't want the whole news and propaganda about the fact that they were letting them die in the prisons. But then I suppose when it came to him, they said the buck has to stop here somewhere, and him being a Lord Mayor, I presume also.
That's it. And he was taken to England to be imprisoned in England.
Terence Maximilian was, yes, whereas Chris Orlos was released.
Tom Barry would be a name to conjure with, but he had this famous escape at Gugan Barra from Barlin, wasn't it? And he
went from the Ballingeary, so up to Barn, I think, up Ballingeary. It was one of the pats in Gugan. It's not there anymore now. It's still kind of there, but it's not signalled or signposted. It was called Ballingeary. It was up the chimney in Pow. They had a camp up there where they were able to stay in safety.
And probably have a great vantage point there as well.
Huge vantage point down below, in the valley below. They did training up there also. I think some months after they came out of ambush, I think it was up there, they were on hiding. All the community in Ballingeary would have been watching out for it and watching on guard.
As I said, all the houses were safe houses that they were being fed and being supported.
I think they were,
So I suppose it's only a century after the famous Cock-Hemini, so a lot of families that were kind of active in that would be very active again in the War of Independence.
Their descendants, I think there was Welshes in Toreendubh that would be up behind my mother's place.
And related, I think, to the Lucey somewhere or another again.
I think that's why they were, the Toomies were cousins of Christopher Losa, I think, through the Welshes.
Yes.
Correct, and the Toomies were Welsh, their mother was Welsh. So that connection was there. I think those Welshes were involved in Cock-Hemini also, for people back, so I think there was that sort of a running generation, I'd say, that was the Dukas.
And even the parish priest in the time, he was a Father O'Leary, and his forebear had died at Kemini. He was from Gerna Tornora, the Mara Shane, and they lived there, but he was quite very republicly minded, and he had preached a few sermons here in the summer of 1920 to say it was okay to attack the servants of the Crown. And we have, just where you were sitting there, we had the shooting of Sergeant Monsell, and they said it was directly linked to the parish priest's sermon. So the bishop anyway took moves anyway to move Father O'Leary from the parish. And we got a Father Burtz who came, and this Father Burtz had come from the cathedral. He had given the last rites to McCurtain, but he ended up in Inchigeela, and he was here for 20 years, and his people were converts. He was a very different mindset to the man that was there before him. And Mick Sean Rue, everybody knew Mick Sean Rue. He was at the Gatabon, and he was one of our local IRA men, and I remember him as a young man here in the hotel, and I said to him, "What did you think of Father Burtz?" Oh, he said he was a right little imperialist, he said. So obviously there would have been a lot of sort of Republican mindset in the parish in 1920, and this is the way the people were. They were sympathisers. They had also grown up with the tradition of Cock-Hemini, and the oral tradition would be very strong in the parish, and that song, Cock-Hemini, would be remembered and sang even at that time. And especially would be cherished in the Irish College and the Clash on the Moon. They would be studying the songs of Marabu O'Leary. So it was kind of a hotbed, I suppose, in some ways. And Toreendubh was home to scholars as well as Republicans.
Really interesting time, I'd say.
A very interesting time, and I suppose the people were very much in earnest. That they really put their heart and soul into it, and I suppose you could say that there was almost like a religious fervour to it as well. That in the life we live today, this religious fervour wouldn't be involved, or wouldn't be as as crucial to the image, you know.
Understand, yes.
Yeah, but you'll see I suppose the character of this Christopher Lucey is, you have a young, brilliant scholar who was doing his medicine and so on, but yet he was so involved in the revolution at the time.
Yeah. He must have really believed in it. For such a young person, it was very admirable, I must say.
And I suppose, you know, if we were in the month of November now, and it's you know, the November is a time when we remember, and I think to his memory, you would say, well, he is not forgotten. And we're lucky you were here today to tell the story. You had written this account for the historical journal some years ago. You've written an article about him, but you would have heard the story at home.
Well, living in Toreendubh, that's right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Maura McCarthy, my next door neighbour, she died when she was 98, so she had a lot of the history at the time.
Yeah.
It was a shame I didn't ask her more about it.
Yeah.
Like everybody should nowadays ask as much as they possibly can. But it's only older when you kind of realise it, I suppose.
It is, but you know, I think you do them honour as well in telling the story, because you know, you would have been impressed by her stories, and you may have to ask or research to get the information, but you keep their memory alive as well, you know.
That's true. Keep the link,
Yeah. So I think we could wind up. I could actually sing one little verse of Co.Cork if you wanted to do that. Sean Glannon came in Ivlera Shavimsha Marian on Fees on Iha Come sheer Colic Shore Ig Macnov Shalom Fenig Ig Enov Masmainta Ig Eist Vagwildo Lebi Gone and On.
Ah, yes.
We're very grateful that Tyke Deneen from Ballingeary, Toreendubh, has been with us today, and Richard, as usual, has managed to capture this on camera, and we send regards to his family, and I think I'm very happy with what we've heard today, that we've given a good account of what happened on the 10th of November 1920 at Toreendubh. And actually Tyke said it's the 20th is written on the memorial stone,
yeah.
but there's a great saying that's an Irish solution to an Irish problem. Leave it at that note.